blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way to the day of judgment. As to what follows, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we are engaged in another new Muslim corner and looking at the critical institution of marriage. And this topic, of course, is one of the most important topics for a new Muslim and for the community. And I found over the years in serving as imam or leader in different masjids and communities that the majority of the questions and the majority of the issues and crises that the community was facing were not based upon fiqh and aqidah, but it was really dealing with marriage and the family, especially marriage within the new context of living in the West. So Muslims over the centuries have developed a lifestyle based upon their environment. And that environment was shaped by Islamic lifestyle, Islamic Sharia for centuries. And there were many aspects of that lifestyle that are understood by the people. You don't have to talk to the people about where to get halal food if you're in a majority Muslim country, because it's everywhere. You don't have to talk to Muslims about where is the masjid, because masjids are available. But when you're living in a majority non-Muslim country, then these issues can become very critical. And how to deal with it, how to navigate Islamic lifestyle becomes a challenge. So therefore, this issue, although within Muslim countries may seem to be a normal type of thing, because the family would remember how my father and mother lived, how they set up the house, how they related to the children. There are certain cultural patterns that are set. And if somebody breaks the pattern or the norm, then it is clear, because the people, the neighbors, the society, the community would recognize this. But outside of that environment now, we have to sort of create our own world. We have to create our own norms. And that is a big challenge, especially when we're faced with social media and faced with a society that itself is going through tremendous changes with morality. And so I'm emphasizing for the new Muslims and for those who are reviving their faith, the foundations of an Islamic marriage, what we call the halal path to marriage, because there is a way of moving toward marriage, and that, of course, begins with the intentions. So right from the beginning, the person has accepted Islam, or the person has really started practicing Islam after many years of just living in a Muslim family. Now, what do? You know relationships, you see it online, you see it in the movies. There's concepts that are out there. And as we discussed, the issue of erotica, of the physical sensuality being in all types of media, that's regularly known within society. Also, the institution of marriage within Western society is a dying institution. So if you look, there are less and less people who are actually getting married. People just decide we're going to shack up. We're going to just live together. And if we like it, we like it. If we don't like it, we don't like it. And so the path to the halal marriage is not an easy one. And it needs to be understood and thrashed out. And there needs to be some flexibility in this, because we're in a difficult situation. So I want to emphasize these points again, so that we have in our mind what is our model, what is a positive road toward marriage. Because we intend, inshallah, to look at some of the challenges And that includes abortion, divorce, child custody. There are some other areas too that we need to touch on, so at least the new Muslims, those reviving their faith, at least have a full picture of the whole process. And so within this path, we identified the niyyah, or the intention, as being the base. And that is that we want to do what's right. We want to have a halal, lawful marriage. We want to be protected through this marriage from immorality. Okay, so there's a reason, not just because I like the color of her hair, or I like how strong he looks. No. One of the key things is to protect ourselves in this world so that we can be successful in the hereafter. The second is, once the intention is made, now what do I do? How do I search? That's not easy, because in a Muslim society, the family might do a lot in terms of finding a mate. There may be normal ways of meeting somebody. Okay, but this society, we got to think outside the box. Okay, so our principles showed us that we need to seek somebody who has good character, who has religion, and to try to avoid lust, the lust-based decisions. Once we've gone through that process and we identify somebody, okay, so you see somebody, what do I do now? Okay, communication happens. And there's nothing wrong with communication. That's the reality. Some communication is with your eyes. Some communication may be if you work together, if you're doing things together. But once that feeling is there in the heart that I want to marry this person, then the next level is the khitbah. Okay, so that is the family needs to know, especially the family of the woman. Okay, so that's like a lawful engagement that's publicly done. Publicly meaning the family knows and people around the individuals. They agree, then the two become makhtub, that they become intended. Like we would say the intended. Of course, when you say engaged or intended in Western societies, sometimes that means you can do just about everything that the married couple does. But in this case, the intended two do not go alone by themselves. Somebody else is there, because we learned that the shaitan would be the third party. And in this, you actually meet each other. You talk, you go somewhere, you interact. So this is important. And once a feeling is there now, and the family at the same time now is doing its negotiation. So the family is, especially the girl's family, is checking him out. Does he have a job? What education? What is his intentions? Doesn't mean he has to be a rich person, no, but at least the potential is there. If the family is satisfied, the couple is satisfied, then of course is the marriage itself, which includes the witnesses, the dowry, the guardian, and that then leads to an agreement, which is the nikah, and the walima, which is the celebration. Okay, and then that's something public. We learned that it should be a public announcement. Doesn't have to be on television or radio, but it is a public announcement. So now I want to look at another area. And that area is threats to the halal path. And we learned that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that one day he drew a straight line and he said, this is the straight path. And on the straight path, there are a number of small paths that are there. And these small paths, at the head of each one of this is a shaitan that wants to take you off the straight path. Okay, so in a sense, if we look at the halal path to marriage, as a type of Sirat al-Mustaqim, then we can also see the threats to the halal path. Okay, and there are a number of them, but we just isolate a few. One, of course, and this is a big one now today, is entertainment and media. Okay, so the overly erotica, sexualized advertisement, films, sexualized music, all of these desensitize people. So the fact of somebody committing adultery becomes like nothing. And as I mentioned in a previous class, when I grew up here in the Americas, and television at that time, and I'm talking back in the 60s, in those days, the for instance, there was a program, I Love Lucy, and Lucy and her husband were not allowed to be seen sleeping in the same bed. Like, that was too much for television. It was immoral. So when nighttime came, they sort of went to different places. They never showed nighttime scene. Imagine that compared to now. What you see on normal television programs would be considered in the 60s and even 70s XXXX. And it's like a normal thing. Okay? So this is a big threat, because what it does is it breaks down the sensitivity of the eyes, because we're watching adultery, even the whole process of going about it. So you learn strategies, literally, and how to do it. You see? It breaks down the ears, what you hear, and of course the heart, which is, the basis of the individual is the heart, which informs, the mind. And the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said in translation, the zina, or the adultery of the eyes, is looking. And the adultery of the ears is listening. So it can actually start there. And this is important for us in understanding threats to the halal path. Now let's look at another one here now, another threat. And this, of course, has become a major thing today. And there's a lot of questions. I'm not a mufti to make decisions, but there are a lot of questions. So online communications. Okay, how do we overcome this? Because for many people, they spend more time online than talking to people. And even now in people's jobs, I'm trying to communicate, with a television or radio network or a service provider. And sometimes I have difficulty knowing whether the person is artificial intelligence or it's a real person. And I was dealing with this AI, and I said to the AI just openly, look, you can't answer my question. Like, you don't know what I'm talking about. And the AI felt really bad. He said, I'm really sorry. I'm just an AI. Like, it wanted to cry, right? It almost wanted to cry. And I really felt sorry for the AI. And I said, look, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, right? But get me a person. Get me a person. But there are some people who live within this bubble. Okay? And now within the bubble, all types of things have been happening. Private digital chats. You can literally have this conversation with people, video calls. They even had a program once of these detectives who were helping people who were being abused online, especially an elderly person who doesn't have anybody, and then somebody contacts them and shows them a picture and starts communicating with them with a different voice. And, he falls in love. He's 75 years old, 80 years old. He has money. And, he wants love. And so that person now, through the digital chat, sets everything up for the marriage, and then even suggests to him, send me some money, because I need to go from one place to another. So he ends up unloading much of his bank account to this individual without even having seen the person. So there's a lot that can happen online. And so that includes, as we're talking about, people who have intentions with each other. And this could be digital, could be video calls, right? Also, people send photos to each other and all types of things. So the basic ruling is that this should be handled in the same way as khalwa, which means when you go alone, two people alone. Okay, when if you're doing a business chat, you're just talking, for instance, about homework or about work at school or about sports or something like this with an individual that you know. But once it gets personal, then it becomes that the rules of khalwa should come in. And that means that there should be a third party, right? So the same rules. I know that's hard for some people to even consider because so much goes online. Okay, but that's the difference between the halal path and the other path. That's the difference. So this is a major threat to our thing. So what are some of the consequences now? And we're just looking at the social consequences of the haram path. Okay, because we have the halal path and then we have the haram path. And I'm emphasizing this, to give us a foundation, to give us basic foundation in what's right. So in other words, before we talk about what's wrong, we want to talk about what's right. Before we go into the issues of what's wrong, we want to look at the positive things. Okay, because if we don't, we can fall into serious problems. On individual level, people can lose their faith. They can literally apostate. Shame comes in. People, especially young people, are being shamed because of what happens online. Psychological emptiness can happen. On a family level, what happens when the haram path to marriage, people are living together and doing the wrong thing, illegitimate children come. And this is, of course, a crisis for a Muslim family within a Muslim society. It's set up in such a way that is very difficult to happen. But within these societies, it's very possible. Broken homes can happen, jealousy, even revenge. And we have cases in some so-called Muslim societies, it's not right, but in some societies, if the girl went out with somebody and the father didn't know, and I don't want to name the countries, they have honor killing, where they will hunt this guy down and kill him. And the people in their society, although they're all Muslims, they won't say anything because his honor was involved. But what was the basis of it? It was a mistake because they were using the haram path to marriage. And if they used the halal path to marriage, then the whole issue of honor killing would not arise. Also, within society itself, right? There's a weakening of trust. Crime comes up, exploitation, moral confusion. This is a little bit higher than our discussion today because we're mainly dealing with, new Muslims, the basis of trying to have a good marriage. But just to give you an overview of how dangerous this is. And so next we want to look, again, I want to bring you some of the wisdom of Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, rahimahullah, who had that wasatiyah, that sort of balanced position in looking at marriage. And of course, the issue of marriage is fiqh, it's jurisprudence. There's a lot of different positions and a lot of extremes that people have. And okay, but what I like about his approach is that it is something which is very doable for somebody who has just come into Islam. It is good advice. And so his advice begins with, in this case, he said, the eye is the gateway to the heart. Okay, it comes through your eye. And desire begins with sight. And you'll see it happen. And even as he paused, the Prophet ﷺ, he actually was riding, on his animal, and there's a young Muslim in back of him, and they were moving, and there were other Muslims there. And so the young guy caught the eye of a girl. That's natural. So eye meets eye, right? This is real because the Prophet ﷺ is a real human being. And so instead of scolding him and putting him in hell, he just moved his head the other way. Okay? Because he realized it starts with the eye. Next, modesty protects both men and women from spiritual disease. You know, people for a long time, especially not a long time, but especially recently, you know, have feel that modesty is like weakness, because our next point says modesty is not weakness or shame, it's strength through self-control. And maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and many up until today, noble people, generally speaking, when they're dealing in society, people are conservative. Okay, modesty is there. You know, and really, you know, Islam in a sense is nobility, because it's bringing us close to the revelation. And in this case, Sheikh Yusuf, he warned against cultures that mock modesty. Now, you see that in this society, right? The prudes and the this and the that. They mock modesty, right? Calling them progressive, while they actually expose human beings to moral harm. They're not progressive. So these are the terms that many of our young people are dealing with. And new Muslims are coming in to Islam. And they're saying, like, are you one of those conservative Muslims? Or are you a progressive Muslim? Okay, we don't believe in these terms. Okay, these terms are made up by a different society. The other wisdom says every civilization that abandoned modesty began to crumble from within. And you can go back in time, look at the Greeks, look at the Romans, look at the ancient Egyptians. You will go across the world. You will see part of the deterioration of the society comes from immorality. So really, this is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a person to actually adopt modesty. Okay? Now, in making lawful marriage easy, and this again is the wasatiyah, this is the balanced type of wisdom here that, you know, we want to, you know, to express to the new Muslim. And really, I want to say this to the Muslim families as well. Because what happens is sometimes you'll have a daughter or you have a son who wants to marry a new Muslim. Okay? You'll have a daughter, you have a son, they want to practice Islam. Okay? And so there's certain issues that are blocking the way to marriage. Okay, now amongst these problems is excessive dowries. And the demands are too high. I mean, I've seen it was almost like a normal thing, you know, for young men to be coming from overseas here to, you know, to North America and saying, I'm going to go to school first, you know, and then I'll finish and get a job. And so I said, when are you going to get married, man? He said, oh, maybe around when I'm in my 30s. Okay, when you're in your 30s, you're going to get married? You know, and your sexuality, your youth is coming in your teens. So what are you going to do in between all that time? What do you do? How do you stay on the straight path? He said, I have to do this because the dowry is so high. If I want to marry somebody from my family, my society, I have to have so much gold. I have to put on, you know, the wedding. You got to even bribe the uncles and the aunties. Like, you literally got to pay off a lot of people. So this person's like literally putting together $50,000 or so before he even gets married. So this is a roadblock to marriage. Lavish weddings, okay? The social pressure that goes on. These are problems in the path of lawful marriages, and it has to stop. Parents making the priority wealth or tribe over piety. Okay, wealth. How much money does he have? Which tribe does he come from? It's blocking halal marriages. Delaying the marriage too much, which leads to temptation. And the Prophet ﷺ said, when a man whose religion and character you are pleased with comes to you with a proposal, then marry him. If you do not, there will be great corruption and fitna on the earth. See, this is prophetic wisdom. That if that person comes, that young person comes, the person's, and it makes the proposal, don't cause confusion and fitna in the land. Okay? And so to continue now, we want to look at Sheikh Qaradawi's recommendations. And I've seen this other scholars as well making these recommendations. And that is simplify the dowry. Don't make it nothing. Some people say, some new Muslims are coming in and say, okay, I'm going to give you, the brother said, I'm going to give you the book of Allah. That's the dowry. Say, no, brother, Allah gave the book of Allah to the girl, right? That's not your dowry, man. Because a dowry, the maha, is supposed to actually empower the woman. It's supposed to, you're putting some wealth in her hands. Okay? That's really the purpose of the dowry itself. But simplify it. And normally, what we do is if you don't know what to do, you're a new Muslim, you can look at sort of what is the medium range within Muslim societies here, not overseas. Look at something that's reasonable within this society, for the dowry, but make it easy. Also, and this is a very good suggestion here that I'd like to make to the individuals, communities, and families, encourage a community marriage fund. So this is an interesting proposal here. A community marriage fund. And that is that from our sadaqah, our charity, Baitul Mal, like every community should have like a treasury house, where it keeps the sadaqah. Keep a section of that even for marriage funds. So if you have new Muslims, young people who want to get married and they cannot afford it, and their family can't afford it, the community could even step in. See, that's a jama'ah. That's what a jama'ah really is. That's a real community in the sense. Okay? And to the families, to the society, especially the families, support the youth with housing, jobs, and counseling. And especially with housing, what you'll see many families do, they have a double story or they have a basement. So, instead of demanding that the young man, has his own apartment, his own house, let them stay in the basement. So at least they're married until he can afford it. And once he can afford it, then they can come outside. But what this does is it supports halal marriages, right? And this is critical. Also to normalize early and simple marriage for those mature and responsible. Normalize it, right? And this is for the whole community as well. And very good advice, if you close the doors of halal, do not be surprised when the haram enters through the windows. This is a deep scholar here. Okay, so if you're closing the doors to halal, haram is going to make its way into our lives. Okay, now, before I go on to the next section here, I want to see, are there any questions that anybody has or comments, concerning these points? Question.
On a previous slide, it mentioned that how it affects the individual.
Yeah.
And it said personal or emotional needs. Could you expand on that?
Yes, that the point is that how does the haram marriages, the haram path affect individual, for emptiness, and that is that when people make serious mistakes, they're committing adultery, the girl gets pregnant, and they're Muslims, it's a massive mistake, and it can cause damage to a person's life, their psychology. They can feel really bad within themselves. Sometimes they even end up running away from their family and stuff. I've seen cases where the girl loves the guy and the family didn't agree, and then they ran away. and they found some imam somewhere, paid him some money, got married without having the proper guardians, the proper things, the system. And then even though they were married, they felt empty. And especially I found on the case of the woman, the girls especially, because the woman she needs her mother, especially when she gets pregnant. She will need her mother and her family. Otherwise, life becomes really empty. Any questions online that anybody has? Now, I want to continue, and this is where Yusuf Qaradawi meets other scholars that I have seen before. I especially studied Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, who was a great West African mujaddid, reviver of the faith, and a scholar. And you'll see many others taking strong positions to strengthen the role of Muslim women. And I say this especially to sisters who have embraced Islam, because it appears that the majority of the women who are people coming into Islam are women. I remember being in Norway, and I had a class, and they said this is going to be a new Muslim class. And so there was about 40 people there, and 3/4 of the people were women. These are Scandinavian women. And they asked questions, and then I asked them a question. Why is there so many women? Like, this is strange to me, because I thought that the image of Islam was a bad one in Scandinavia. And they said, no, we see Muslim family as the last hope, because our men are confused about their identity. And the Scandinavian people, quiet as it's kept, you think Vikings are just crazy, people chopping off everybody's heads. Vikings were actually farming people. They had very solid families. They would send people out, on their missions, and some of them would turn berserk, but they were generally solid families. So Scandinavian families are very solid, and you'll see things being done in Scandinavia that you don't see done in other places. Like right now, I just heard that it was Denmark, I believe it was. They banned social media. They're banning social media for children 15 years old or under. No social media. They're taking a step. You see, and in this case, the Muslim sisters outnumbered the brothers, new Muslims. So I took a strong stance. And this is the stance Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi has taken, Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, and it right from the Prophet ﷺ, you see it's based upon authentic sunnah, and that is that, a woman, has the right to dignity, education, and she contributes to the society. Okay? She should be a contributor in the masjid, in the community. Don't see yourself, when you marry a Muslim man, now you're locked up. He's got the key, and you got to stay in prison. That is not real Islam according to the Sunnah. And so, number one, a woman has a right to choose her spouse. It does not have to be arranged marriage. She can actually choose going through her family as well. She has a wali, but there's nothing wrong with her choosing. And we see that Khadija radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, she chose Muhammad, peace be upon him. She chose him. So there's nothing wrong with that. Secondly, that the woman cannot be forced or exploited. Okay? So as a new Muslim woman, you cannot be forced into a marriage or exploited. Don't think it's Islamic to allow yourself for this to happen. Her education and faith and independence is essential to raising the strong family. So Muslim women, especially new Muslim women, should be educated in Islam. It is really important, right? So we have strong Muslim society. Work and public participation are allowed for Muslim women, okay? When they do not lead to harm or neglect of duties, right? Nothing wrong with a Muslim woman working or going to school within the duty and the families of Islam. You can work it out. But some people with a distorted image of Islam think that the women are in lockdown. All they do is just get pregnant, stay in the house, and take care of the children. They're not educated. They can't work. They can't do anything, but just locked down. Okay, this is not the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and you will see Muslim women from the early days of Islam, even in the Medina period after the laws of Islam came in, were actively involved, even in going out in the battles. They would even go to the battles. Another interesting point is that Islam raised women to be a partner in faith, not a prisoner in the home. Okay, this is really important. And I was in a community where, and this is extremism, you're going to get these extremism. I'm just letting you know before it hits you. Where the brother, the sister called up, the brother, wouldn't even allow her to answer the phone because he said that's wrong. Because her voice, the salt al-mara aura, that her voice is her private parts. So he locked his wife down and wouldn't even allow her to answer the phone. This is extremism, right? And this is not Islam. Okay, but Islam does allow for the woman to have freedom and to be a dignified person. Okay, question.
So the question here is that I think it goes back to your comments on using apps and online even to get married. This person is asking, saying that certain new Muslims live in places with minimal to no Muslim presence. Would it be considered halal for them to use these apps for online media for marriage to become an option? What rules should be considered?
Yes. So the question is that there are Muslims living in areas where that there's not much of a community, and they need to use the apps, in order to get married and for communication. Is this permissible? I'm not a mufti to make fatwas, in this. However, the social media is, it is a tool, and it can be used. And remember the principles that we had. We established these principles in the beginning. Ad-dururat tubih al-mahdurat. That which is of a necessity, it makes exceptions. So if there is a necessity, the person is living in Iqaluit, far in Nunavut, north of Canada, and there's hardly any Muslims around. So they will have to depend more upon social media in order for communications. However, when it comes to solidifying a marriage, this is where contact has to be made. And this is where her guardian, her wali, has to be informed. The same principles, if it starts getting deep conversations online, almost lustful, that should end. So that same principles are there. And the wali or the guardian should know about the situation. But there's nothing wrong with using, the social media. And in some cases, it is a necessity. Now, the other general questions anybody has? So these are new frontiers that we're actually facing now, and it is very critical for us to understand it. At the same time, with the dignity of the woman, um, we need to look at the roles, the duties, and rights of men and women. And I remember going to a conference, and it said the rights of Muslim men and the duties of Muslim women. You see the difference in those two? The rights of Muslim men and the duties of Muslim women. We said, no, 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 brothers. It's the rights and duties of Muslim men and the rights and duties of Muslim women. Because Muslim women have rights too, right? Right, and as well as duties. So in looking at this, number one, with the family, again, how do we set up an Islamic household? That the husband should be qawwam, the husband, based upon, what the Quran has told us, Arijalu qawwamuna ala nisa, men are protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has given, an advantage, some more strength than others, and because of how they support them from their wealth. Okay, so the man should be, he is responsible. He's the guardian. Okay, but this qawwama, this is not male domination. That's a misunderstanding. It's not domination, it's responsibility. So in other words, physically a man has an advantage. Of course, times have changed now, and there's AI, and we're all, women can do karate and all that. But the reality is, every month the woman has menstrual cycles. She has to have a baby, which is going to make her body weak. This is the nature that Allah has made. The man's body is more set, for hard work and for fighting. So it's an advantage. It's a physical and psychological advantage. So therefore, the husband should maintain and protect his family, right? And give moral leadership to the family. So this is the job of the man. How does he lead? He leads through service and wisdom, not tyranny and arrogance. Some men think that they come in the house and everybody runs away and they're all afraid of the man. No, this is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the man, according to our rules, these is our wisdom. He is not a ruler, but he's a shepherd. He's not a master. He's a caretaker. See the difference between the two? So he's not the ruler. He's a shepherd taking care of the flocks, right? He's the caretaker of the family. And an interesting point is that the husband is supposed to provide for his wife and his children food, shelter, clothing, and general well-being. It's on the man to do this, okay? And I know that this is a difficult thing to say in the society we live in, because the way the society is set up, you usually need two people working. That may be the case. However, the main responsibility is the man. Okay? And in this, the husband should treat his wife with kindness, right? He should overlook faults, maintain affection. This is an interesting point. The Prophet ﷺ never struck any woman in his house. He never hit a woman. Now, this is heavy, because some cultures, they feel that you have to hit the woman to prove your manhood. And there's some strange things that actually goes on in cultures. And I don't want to say which country it is, but my son, like we had gone to one of the Muslim countries, and my son was a young student of knowledge, and he looked down, into this farm, and there was a husband and wife, and they were arguing with each other. And they argued to the point where the man was angry. And so then the woman, bent down, she bent backwards, and the man took a paddle and he gave her a beating with the paddle, because she felt she did something wrong. And this is what my son told me. He watched this thing happen. She bent down and he gave her a paddling. Okay? This is total. The Prophet ﷺ never struck any woman. And he mended his own clothes. Think about this. He sewed his own clothes. He did housework. Some men feel, I'm not going to do it. I'll never wash the dishes. I'll never sweep the floor. I'm the man. Wrong understanding. Okay? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who are the best to their wives, and I am the best of you to my wives. Okay? That's our example of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, for the woman's case, so we can just get through this, her roles and duties, partnership and obedience, right, within righteousness. The wife is her husband's partner. Remember Zoj? His partner and helper in faith and life. So they're companions, right? Not servant or slave. She is obedient because he's supposed to be the emir of the house. He's the leader of the house. But her obedience is not servitude. It's cooperation in righteousness. Okay? And if her husband commands her with what is sinful, she must not obey. Now, Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, who was a great scholar in West Africa, he took this, he really took this to heart. And he talked to the people in Hausa land in northern Nigeria, and he said, I see that the women are not being educated. So she said to the husbands, the men, educate the women, do something. They still didn't do it. So he told the women, disobey your husbands if you have to come to my circle after Asr prayer. So he established women's education. He said, if your husband disagrees, disobey him. Now, the elderly scholars, many of them said, how dare you say something like this? The man is the ruler. What he says goes. Uthman Danfodio, rahimahullah, he quoted the Prophet ﷺ, La ta'a lil makhluq fi ma'siyat al-khaliq. There is no obeying the creation when the creation disobeyed Allah. You see? So this man disobeyed. He did not allow you to be educated. So there's no more obedience. So in other words, a woman's obedience to her husband is based on his submission to Allah. If he's asking her to do something wrong, she doesn't have to follow. Now, in a lot of cultures, this is a heavy statement that I'm making, right? Some people would be very angry with me if I said that. But this is the reality of the deen. And the wisdom of the Shaykh here is the woman is not a shadow of the man. She is his companion in responsibility and reward. She's not his shadow. Okay, so liberation, we don't have to go to secular women's liberation. There's liberation for women in Islam. If we go back to the sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Any immediate questions anybody had here on anything that I said? Floor is open. So I want you to think about this and forward your questions for next week class. This is a hot topic. It might have shocked some people, some of the things, but this is the reality that new Muslims should know, especially new Muslim women. So you do not get caught in somebody's culture. You're accepting Islam. You are not accepting the culture of the man. So I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wa akhir da'wana. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.